We are live.
Welcome everybody to the April 1st, 2021 Planning Commission meeting. If I can have a roll call, please.
Yes, Chair Gutierrez,
Here,
Vice Chair Hogan,
he's excused.
Secretary Clow,
Present.
Commissioner Chavez,
Here.
Commissioner Faulkner,
Present.
Commissioner Garcia,
Here.
Commissioner Lawrence,
Here.
Commissioner Picarello,
Here.
Commissioner Satania.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. And if we can have the Pledge of Allegiance, Commissioner Garcia, led by Commissioner Garcia, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner Garcia. Moving on to the approval of the agenda. Any changes from staff?
Chair, yes, staff does have some changes. On the agenda, item E1 states that there was a case 2020-2999, 4250 Cerritos Road, Santa Fe Place Mall Apartments Development Plan postponed for March 18th. We would like to remove this item because the findings of facts and conclusions of law for that case were approved at the last meeting. And so we just had to publish, we had a publishing deadline, so we had published before the commission had met and decided on that. We'd also like to, staff would also like to recommend the item under F3, case 2020-2999, which is the 4250 Cerritos Road Small Apartments Development Plan, that case and that hearing be postponed until April 15th, contingent upon F1 and 2 going through today or being passed by the commission. So that is staff's recommendation to postpone the hearing for that case for F3. Then the final amendment to the agenda would be item I under matters from the commission, to include an item from the commission to discuss the appointment of the policy subcommittee and appointment of the chair for the policy subcommittee. And those are the only changes from staff.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. Any changes from the commission? Seeing none, if I can have a roll call for the agenda or a motion.
Motion to
agenda, please.
approve, Commissioner Faulkner. Second, Commissioner Lawrence.
Thank you. Now, if I can have a roll call for the agenda as amended, please.
Yes, Commissioner Chavez,
Yes.
Commissioner Clow,
Yes.
Commissioner Faulkner,
Yes.
Commissioner Lawrence,
Yes.
Commissioner Picarello,
Yes.
Commissioner Satania.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. Moving on, we have approval of minutes. Our first one is from the February.
I didn't get called to vote.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Commissioner Garcia.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. The motion has been approved.
Thank you. Moving on to the approval of minutes, we have 3 sets. The first one is from February 18th, 2021. Any changes from staff?
Chair, staff has no changes. Thank you.
Changes from the commission? There's no changes. I'll take a motion.
Motion to approve, Commissioner Faulkner.
Commissioner Chavez to second.
Thank you. If we can have a roll call.
Commissioner Chavez,
Yes.
Commissioner Clow,
Yes.
Commissioner Faulkner,
Yes.
Commissioner Garcia,
Yes.
Commissioner Lawrence,
Yes.
Commissioner Picarello,
Yes.
Commissioner Satania.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. The next set of minutes is from March 4th, 2021. Any changes from staff?
Chair, commissioners, no changes from staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Any changes from the commission? If I can get a motion, please?
Commissioner Faulkner to approve.
Commissioner Chavez the second?
Thank you. If we can have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Chavez,
Yes.
Commissioner Clow,
Yes.
Commissioner Faulkner,
Yes.
Commissioner Garcia,
Yes.
Commissioner Lawrence,
Yes.
Commissioner Picarello,
Yes.
Commissioner Satania.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. And finally, on the approval of the minutes for March 18th, 2021, any changes from staff?
Chair, we amended the agenda to remove that item.
Oh, that's right. Okay. Thank you. So that's been removed, and so has letter E, the findings and conclusions. So that means we will be moving on to old business, and our first business under old business is a motion to rescind Commission's March 4th decision to deny case 2020-2999, 4250 Cerrillos Road. Commissioner Clow, you have the floor.
Oh, thank you. So I guess it was about almost a month ago, we heard this matter. And this is the apartments over on the at the mall, the Via Linda Mall, now called Santa Fe Place. And staff recommended that be approved, but it turned out that the applicant wasn't willing to address the sidewalk issue on the south side of the building, and also the issue dealing with the, I think it was 40 parking spaces that were not designated, required parking spaces that were not designated. And so I think the consensus that I saw was that I think everyone was in agreement that those two issues were important issues and that they should, the applicant should comply with those. And therefore, I think the proper thing for us to have done was to move to approve the project subject to all of the conditions, meaning that they would have to comply with those two conditions. Instead, a motion was made to deny the application, and it passed, I think, unanimously. So it was the next day that I started thinking about it and thinking that that was unfortunate that we denied it. And I think that everything we heard last week in the 3 different presentations, this is probably an ideal project. I mean, it's ideal for a couple of reasons. First of all, there was no opposition to this project. And, it was interesting because I saw an article in the paper about why, when there was no opposition to a project, did the Planning Commission deny it. When there is opposition, they always approve it. So I think it was just sort of a quirk that we didn't probably, I think, take the proper course. But in any event, there was no objections to this project. It's also in one of the presentations that we had 2 weeks ago, there was discussion about parking lots, big, gigantic parking lots that are really ugly and fairly somewhat obsolete in terms of size, is a really good place to start putting some apartments, some other type of residential development. And so this was the first one that came before us. So I raised the issue that perhaps we should reconsider this, that we should rescind our vote and go back and take a look at this again. Now, in the meantime, I have learned that the applicant is willing to address the sidewalk, to put a sidewalk on the south side, and is willing to designate all of the required parking as designated parking. So based on, even if they weren't willing to do that, I think it is more prudent for us as a planning commission to approve it. There's no reason to deny it and say, if you want to build, you can build, but you have to comply with all these conditions. But in any event, they're willing to comply with all the conditions. So I would request that we consider rescinding not only our vote, but also rescinding the findings, and that we then at our next meeting, the applicant we can address the issue again.
Okay, so yeah, you're gonna make a motion to rescind?
Yes, I'd make a motion to rescind.
Okay, do I have a second?
Commissioner Picarella, just second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. It's now open for discussion. If any of the commissioners would like to talk on this issue. Commissioner Satenia?
Yeah, I just want to understand if it's appropriate for those that were not present at that meeting to actually vote on this case, given that the evidence has not been provided to them.
Would you like me to address that, Chair Gutierrez?
Please.
All of the members present tonight can vote on the motion to rescind. If you're comfortable doing so, I think you've seen the findings of fact that were in the last packet. You probably received the materials. So if you're comfortable voting, that's fine tonight. There's no limitation on that. If you would prefer to abstain, that is also acceptable.
I think I'll abstain.
Yeah, this is Commissioner Chavez. I'll abstain as well.
Thank you, ladies. Commissioner
you can-
Satenia, you still have the floor. Any other?
I don't think I have anything else.
Okay. Any of the other commissioners have any? Commissioner Garcia?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just for a point of clarification, we're motion on the floor is to rescind the motion of denial, if I'm understanding correctly, for the project. And in order for us to bring it back to discussion or to for another vote on possible approval at the next meeting, is that correct?
That's my understanding, but I was also going to ask for clarification as to whether Commissioner Clow's motion encompassed both item F1 and F2. I presume that she intended that because it kind of, you can't have really one without the other to accomplish the
Right.
stated objective, but
Yeah, no, I moved for both, that we, one, rescind and both the decision and the findings, and that, and all it will do is open it back up again. And, so I think Commissioner Chavez and Faulkner, if they're comfortable, could vote on this motion, because all it will do is open it back up again so that it is an open matter that will be presented again for the commission to either approve or deny it. So we're not saying one way or the other that we're going to approve or deny it. We're just saying, let's open this back up. Let's look at it again, and let's take another look at it.
that's
Thank you.
correct. And if the motion passes, the commission can still reach any decision at the subsequent
Yes,
meeting.
yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Picarello, you were a second on that. Are you okay with F1 and F2?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Escobar, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to inform everybody that the applicant has advised me that they will provide new documentation meeting those conditions that would be able to be presented at a later meeting, so that the two planning commissioners that were not available to the presentation would get a full presentation of the application.
Thank you. So, commissioners, any more discussion? Seeing none, if we can have a roll call vote, please.
Yes, Commissioner Chavez,
Yes.
Commissioner Clow,
Yes,
Commissioner Faulkner,
I'm going to abstain still.
Commissioner Garcia,
Yes.
Commissioner Lawrence,
Yes.
Commissioner Picarello,
Yes.
Commissioner Satania.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion has been approved.
Thank you. So F3 is been approved for removal on the agenda. So we're going to new business. And our first one is case 2021-3177, 4262 Agua Fria Street and 4701 Rafina Street, Agua Fria Final Subdivision. So Mr. Logston?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And it is a two-part case. So the second case is 2021-3183, which is 4702 Rafina Street. Together, the two cases make up the 61 lot Agua Fina subdivision, which the Planning Commission recommended approval of on January 7th of this year. So the applicant is in just for final subdivision approval now. The applicant has been working with the residents on the wall, and I will let her address that. There's really not much to say here. There is some new material in the packet that I know one of the residents in the attendees room intends to speak on, so I won't really touch on that now. I think I'd prefer to come back, let them speak for themselves on that. And that portion of it was one of your exhibits, the resolution that the Agua Fria Traditional Village passed and their comments on long-range planning. So once again, I'll let them speak for themselves before I, represent what that is. So really, there's not a whole lot to say in this final subdivision. As luck happens, or as things happen, there was a little bit of a grievous error. It is easily fixed. And I just wanted to show the commission that as I was preparing materials for, let me get the right desktop here. Can you see my desktop now? Yes?
Not yet.
Oh, whoops, I didn't press share, sorry. Okay. It has to do with the stick-built homes thing, the stick-built homes condition. The applicant is fully doing this, but there was a bit of an error in the packet materials. The covenants, I'm not finding. That's not it. The covenants do contain a line about stick-built homes. I can't seem to find that among my materials right now to show you, but then right after it, there was a remnant that just we all overlooked that still references manufactured homes and modular homes. And then it follows up a few lines later with talking about stick-built homes again. So I just want to ensure the residents and the commission that we intend to do this. On my staff report here, you can see condition 1 is a restrictive covenant for site-built homes. Homeowner association covenants, which like I said, I must have closed them, will be corrected. It references site-built homes, but there was a remnant, like I said. And then I also want to show the commission, this is the final plat draft with all the signatures of approval that go on it and recordation and so forth. And I just wanted to show the commission that as was conditioned at preliminary subdivision, there is a line on the plat right here, line 21, wait for it to come into focus, that says only site-built homes are permitted in the subdivision and manufactured homes are not permitted. So I just wanted to kind of nip that in the bud right now because I just discovered it right before the meeting and I didn't want public comment to dwell on that unnecessarily. And with that, I'll basically end my presentation. The staff does recommend approval of this subdivision and we've prepared findings and motions for you in your staff report and I will stop there. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Logston. While we're on public comment and the presenter, if you do run across it, just bring it back up if you figure out how we can correct that error. And at one time you did a real nice sheet for us when it came time for a motion. Did you do that for this case?
Let me get my staff report up.
If you did, just put it up when it comes
I'm not
time.
sure I quite followed you.
One time you presented us with a nice cheat sheet on when it came time for a motion. I don't know if you did it for this case or not. I think it was a more
I
complex
didn't,
case.
but when that time comes, I can bring up my staff report for you, which does have the motions in order.
Okay, I think that helps if you would,
Okay.
when that time comes. This is, Ms. Vihil, do you have the presentation for us? Good evening.
I do. Good
Thank
evening.
you. Please.
Thank you. I will go ahead and swear you in. Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Dolores Vihel. I'm with Liaison Planning Services, 1830, PO Box 1835, Santa Fe, New Mexico, 87504. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, Commissioners. Like Mr. Longston, we do agree with all the conditions, and we're here to answer any questions you may have. We have provided staff with all the corrections that have been requested from the DRT committee and members. And once again, I want to send the record that this application is for a subdivision, affordable housing subdivision that will only allow stick-built homes on site. And I'd also like to mention that on March 27th, the applicant met, and Mr. Summers met with the Las Acequias Neighborhood Association, and to discuss the wall or a barrier, should I say, for the area between the subdivision and Las Acequias. Unfortunately, I was unable to make that meeting, so Mr. Summer will address that. We appreciate your approval and we stand for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Summer, do you want to address that now, or you want to wait till after public comment to get into it?
Mr. Chair, thank you. Why don't we just wait until we hear what everybody has to say? Thank you.
Okay, we'll give you guys a chance after. This is a public hearing. If anybody from the public would like to speak on this case, please raise your hand. I see we do have one call-in person, and there's a way to connect, and Noah will explain to you how if you want to speak. We'll start calling people from the public. Go ahead, Mr. Burke.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. The call-in is actually our contract traffic engineer. So if the commission has any questions, that is our call-in tonight, and his name is Mario, and so we can promote him or unmute him if the commission has questions for him. So the first speaker is Fabian Trujillo. Mr. Trujillo, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. And now you can enable talking, and you'll be sworn in, and then you'll be given time to speak on behalf of the Las Acequias Neighborhood Association.
Mr. Trujillo, do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Sure. Fabian Trujillo, 1157 Vuelta de las Acequias. And I'm
Thank
the
you.
president of Las Acequias Neighborhood Association. Mr. Chair and members of the Planning Commission, we asked to give a presentation tonight, and I would like to go ahead and do so. And I'd like to have screen share capabilities to show that.
Fabian, just let me, I'll mute you and then I'll promote you to panelist. So here you'll be promoted to panelist right now. And then you'll be able to share your screen.
Okay.
All right, you should be able to share your screen right now.
It's not showing up.
Well, you're a panelist now, so if you go down to the bottom, you should have that share screen function.
Yeah, I see it, and I'm very familiar with Zoom. It's just that my presentation is not showing up.
Trujillo, would you like to work on it, and we'll get back to you after some other speakers?
Sure.
Okay.
I'm just going to mute you, Fabian, so that you can figure that out, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. Chair and Commissioners, the next speaker with their hand raised is Catherine Baca, Catherine, I'm going to go ahead and allow you to speak. Please unmute yourself, and then you'll be sworn in and your 2 minutes will begin.
Ms. Baca, do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do, but it's William Me.
Oh, Mr. Me.
Catherine is our treasurer, and she has the Zoom account, so I think it
Okay.
overrode who it is.
Okay, thank you. So I will swear you, Mr. Me in. Mr. Me, do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
It's William Me, and I'm president of the Agua Fria Village Association, and my address is 2073 Camino Samuel Montoya, and that's Santa Fe, New Mexico, 87507. Okay. Well, basically, I was able to read the land use department's staff report, and it included my letter from January 5th, 2019 to the mayor and the council on planning issues, especially along Rufina. And then also it included the resolution from the Agua Fria Village Association. So I'm grateful that you were able to put that in the packet. And also, hopefully in the future, the Village Association would be able to participate in the policy committee that the City Planning Commission is about to form. But, we appreciate that, the 28 lots that enter onto Agua Fria, that there's a locked emergency gate, against the power line easement. And so we're grateful to that. So we're kind of thinking that, maybe this isn't such a bad proposal as when we first addressed a lot of these issues. And it's been a couple of years that, we've been working with liaison planning. But, I think we're at a position now that it's, maybe tolerable to us. So that's basically what I have to say tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Me.
Thank you.
Do you want to go back, Fabian? It looked like you were ready to share screen. So if you're ready, we'll go back to you.
Okay, let's try it again. Jeez.
And other members of the public, while we're waiting, if you want to speak on this, please raise your hand.
You know what? It doesn't look like the share screen is going to work. Let me just go ahead and give the presentation.
Fabian, if you want to email it to me, I can try to place it. I can try to bring it up on my screen and share it.
Okay, that'll work.
Yeah.
Let me just send it to you.
Okay, other members of the public that want to testify on this case, please raise your hand. Thank you. Cheryl Odom's up, Mr. Burke, if we can have her testify, please.
Mr. Chair, Cheryl, go ahead and unmute yourself right now, and you'll be sworn in and be given 2 minutes to speak. Thanks.
Yes, do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Cheryl Odom, 1152 Vuelta de las Acequias.
Thank you.
I just I want to tell you how thrilled I am to hear that there's going to be a locked gate now on Agua Fria. As a sometime historian, I understand the need for gridding, but it seems to me that there are places in Santa Fe where that should not be a goal. I think of something like a Acequia Madre Street or Canyon Road area or places on the east side where you would meet a lot more pushback than you do on the south side. So something like Agua Fria Village to me should remain sacred as a historic area and should not have countless roads punched through. So I'm very excited to hear that there's been a solution to that problem. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Ms. Odom. Mr. Burke, Catherine Baca.
Sure, I think that's Willie Me
Willie Me.
in that one, but maybe Catherine is there and would like to speak on behalf, so I can, or somebody else from the association. Catherine, I've unmuted yourself, so if you unmute yourself, you'll be sworn in and given 2 minutes to talk.
It's William Me again. I had lowered my hand, but apparently that doesn't show up. So excuse me.
Okay.
Thank you, William. Is there anyone else there with you that's going to testify while we have you? Were you able to receive the email from Mr. Trujillo? Or not yet?
Chair, Commissioners, I haven't received anything yet.
Okay. Other members of the public that want to speak on this case, please raise your hand. Any other members of the public? Mr. Logston, you have your hand up while we're waiting, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Gutierrez and Commissioners. Since we are still in public testimony, I just wanted to kind of clarify one thing that got said. I believe Cheryl Odom misunderstood what was meant by the gate on Agua Fria. The proposal does not have a gate on that road on Agua Fria. I believe what Mr. Me was referring to is the fire gate on the south end of that road, which basically prevents other traffic from coming north on that road and entering directly into the village. So I just wanted to clarify that one point because I believe I understand what Mr. Me meant, but it sounded like Cheryl had a different understanding. So I wanted to give that piece of information in case there's any discussion that needs to occur. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee.
All right, Chair, I did get Fabian's email and it's up on my screen. So Fabian, if you want me to, I can go ahead and start sharing screen if the chair wishes.
Please.
Sure, I'm ready.
Okay.
So if you can go to the next slide. The first slide. So first of all, the Las Acequias Neighborhood Association would like to show our appreciation for the Planning Commission and the staff for their guidance and listening to our requests. We also would like to especially thank Lee Logston, the case manager, for facilitating many of these meetings with Agua-Fina and Lana. And we'd also like to thank Noah Burke and Eli Isaacson for helping us with the process and everything that we're going. So again, thank you for everything. So next, let's go to the next slide. So tonight I'd like to talk to you. I'm going to provide you a brief interview of Las Acequias and the Neighborhood Association. I'm going to talk to you about the socioeconomic demographics for Las Acequias and the northeast side of Santa Fe. I'm going to demonstrate why the Planning Commission should use economic equity as part of Chapter 14 and the city's economic development plan as part of subdivision plans. And then I'm going to provide you reasons for a wall and how it improves equity and the socioeconomic disparity between the south side and the north side subdivisions. Next, Noah. The Las Acequias Neighborhood Association Development began in the early 80s. Before that, Las Acequias, it was part of Agua Fria Village and home to many families that settled in Santa Fe since 1610. Currently, there are 653 homes and 4,890 people who reside in Las Acequias. Las Acequias is part of Census Tract 12.02, which is one of the poorest census tracts in Santa Fe. Las Acequias neighbors are comprised of essential workers, government employees, families, and retirees. Go ahead, next. You can see that picture that we have. That's the neighborhood food drive. This is something that one of our members started and has been adopted countywide. The association was formed in 1999. It is a volunteer organization board and is not organized with HOA yearly fees. Everything that we do for what we do at the association are from donations from our residents, which include putting out newsletters, flyers, and all kinds of planned activities. Our association engages with residents to help build pride and encourage participation in Santa Fe, and we try to create a sense of community. Next slide. So let's talk about the north side of Santa Fe. So let me give you a couple of key demographic areas. Census Tract 10.01 is over there where Old Pecos Trail is. As you can see, it's predominantly white, and the minority population is 37.2%. The median family income is $95,000. The per capita income is almost $51,000, and the unemployment rate is 5.4%. If you go to the next slide, please, Noah. And for this is actually Census Tract 12.02. It says 10.01. It's a mistake. I'm sorry. But this is where Las Acequias is. The population over here is comprised of over 80% of the population, or actually 92% of the population is minority, and 8.2% of it is white. The median family income is $41,000, and the per capita income is $18,000, and the unemployment rate is 7.4%. So as you can see, if you compare both areas of town, there's great economic disparity over here. The next slide. So tonight, if you look, what we would like to talk about is the economic quality and quality of life considerations. In chapter 14.3.2-6F, it says that the applicant shall state how the provisions for the city's economic development plan and general plan are compatible with neighborhood livability. You know, there's not a whole lot of guidance there, but some of the things that we can do from inference and stuff is that improving the quality of neighborhoods impacts the Santa Fe's economic base. It allows for people to buy homes if new jobs are created, whether they're created from startups, expansions and retentions, or whether they're created by new companies that come into Santa Fe. If you look at the disparity, that per capita income between both of these census tracts is pretty desperate. The south side is made up of probably 1/5 of what happens with the east side. And if you look at this and you look at what the state does, the Planning Commission is empowered by the city's police power to improve equity and neighborhood livability. And so the suggestions that we have been fighting for, and one of the things that we would like to see happen for improving subdivisions on the south side, are we've been looking for site-built homes instead of manufactured homes or mobile homes, because most of those homes are located on the south side. We want these to be, we want the subdivisions to be compatible with the neighborhood. We want, there's a lot of crime here. We want things that happen over here to help deter or prevent crime. And so we believe that some of those are to build attractive barriers and walls in the subdivision to increase the citywide's neighborhood equity. If you go to the next slide, please. So the reasons that we think that there should be a wall. One, it improves the equity between the north and south side of Santa Fe. It meets the general plan and the economic development plan. It enhances the look for new subdivisions. Wooden fences deteriorate within 5 years, while block walls last 20 to 30 years. They deter crime and they improve security. The cost of a block wall is approximately $65 per linear foot, which adds only about $3,500 to a cost of a home. And one of the things too, we think this would keep the promise that Mr. Rodriguez made at the ENN, at the neighborhood association meetings he attended, to put a wall here in support of Las Acequias for the rezone of Aguafina. So next. Okay, here's some examples of some homes and walls on the east side of town. This is somewhere in that census tract that I was telling you. Next. These are some more north side homes that you're talking about. As you can see, walls are very prevalent. Next. This is the Jackson subdivision on the south side that the commission approved. And as you can see that there's a wall that's going around the whole subdivision over here, and that had about 28 to 30 some homes into it. Next. And this is over at Zaffarano and Rufina, and there's another wall that's going up over there. So these, next. And this one is another wall over on the south side. Next. This is Cielo Azul, which was built over on the south side, and they're having walls up over there. And that wall is over off of Agua Fria. Next. So we think that walls are something that are important for equity. They deter crime, and they are promised. So in conclusion, what I've talked to you tonight is how Las Acequias is comprised, how it has a strong neighborhood association to advocate for the quality of the south side, how a block wall will promote equity, and how doing or by the commission, the planning commission, excuse me, by the planning commission agreeing to make sure that there's a block wall in all neighborhoods, that it promotes neighborhood quality and the objectives of the general plan and the economic development plan. And that's all I have tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Trujillo.
You're welcome.
We're still on the public hearing part. Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak? Please raise your hand. Vicky, Mr. Burke?
Thank you, Vicky. Go ahead and unmute yourself right now. You'll be sworn in, and then your time will begin.
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Vicky Van Hatten. I'm at 4360 Paseo de la Acequia. And I just wanted to say that I and many of my neighbors agree completely with what Fabian just presented. We were told that by Mr. Rodriguez that there would be a wall built as well as stick-built homes. Those were the two main things we agreed on at a huge meeting, which I think we had 60 to 80 neighbors there, as well as the developers. They agreed on a wall at that time. They've since gone back and said they're going to put up, you know, the cedar fencing that everybody has in these lower income neighborhoods. And it's just really unfortunate that they went back on their word. And at our last meeting with them, you know, they weren't really willing to negotiate at all. They broke off into a 10-minute meeting and came back and said, no, we're going to build the cheap fence instead. So it's just really sad and unfortunate that Southside residents get treated this way. I'm a longtime resident of this neighborhood. I love it. I wouldn't trade my house for one that costs twice as much in a better neighborhood, quote, better. But we have wonderful neighbors. We take care of each other. And I'm raising my two children here with pride. And I feel that this adjacent subdivision, if they did, you know, build a wall like they said they were going to and kept their word, that it would help us maintain our property values and our quality of life. That's about all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Vicki. Anybody else? Delia Garcia.
Delia, go ahead and unmute yourself and you'll be sworn in and you can speak after that.
Okay. Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Delia Garcia. I am at 1234 Senda del Valle, and that's in Las Acequias.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to say that I completely agree with Vicki. I think that taking pride in our homes and the safety where we're raising our kids is very important. The block wall was agreed upon. I feel that that should be something that that like it's been said will increase the home values. It will, you know, it's just it makes us feel safer. It's a safety thing as well. And I'm in support of that. And that's it.
Thank you, Delia. Anybody else like to speak on this case? Tom Gomez.
Mr. Gomez, go ahead and unmute yourself. You'll be sworn in and then you can begin to speak.
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Tom Gomez, and I reside at 1028 Avenida Linda in Las Acequias. I also just want to concur with Fabian Trujillo's presentation and all the neighbors that are going to be bordering this. I truly believe the block wall would be the best for all scenarios as for long-term use, you know, throughout this whole project. Not only is it going to help our property, you know, values, but especially during the time of construction. Unfortunately, you know, we on this side of that Cielo Azul, we had to feel a lot of the pain with construction and the noise, and especially since it's going to be pretty much you know, a few feet from my fence on a daily basis. I think a wall bordering this whole thing is truly meant as that barrier. I know that the barrier word has been used, but the wall was truly agreed upon on those meetings. I truly was there as well. And I just want to make sure that, you know, the developers, you know, stay to their word. Mr. Rodriguez did say that, and I just want to hold him, you know, to make sure that he keeps it, because the way sometimes it changes, I don't know if he would keep some of the other things that he agreed upon either, especially after our last meeting when they just said they were going to put up a fence and that was their call. So I just wanted to let you guys be informed of this, on how it progressed, and, you know, hopefully, you know, you could help us on this side, and because we really enjoy our homes as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. You got one more call in, Mr. Burke, it looks like. And anybody else want to testify on this case? Will you tell them how to with a call in, please, Mr. Burke?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. If you're calling in and you'd like to speak on this issue or this case tonight, please press *9 and that will raise your hand. Or if you're in the audience watching as an attendee, you can raise your hand to speak if you haven't done so already.
Else going once? Going twice? Mr. Burke, nothing on the call in?
Chair, I do not see any raised hand from the call-in.
Okay, I don't see any hands up. Do you?
I do not.
Seeing none, we will close the public comment section of this and move to the commission. Commissioners? Mr. Summer, did you want to comment or did you want to wait till after you hear direct questions from the commissioners?
I'd like to wait if we could, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Veal, anything that you want to add at this point?
I apologize. I had a difficulty just a moment ago. And what was your question?
I was just asking if there's anything else you want to add at this point.
Mr. Chair, not at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Garcia, you have your hand up. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question. I think Mr. Fabian raised a question or showed a picture of the Jackson subdivision. And I frequently drive Agua Fria and Lopez Lane and all those. And I did notice as well that there's a wall being constructed at the same time. I know the consensus of the commission at a previous meeting was that we should not require the developer to put a wall, given the fact that it does add tremendous amount of cost to building, especially right now with the what building materials are costing. It's gone up considerably. And so I could be compassionate about that in terms of the building side. I also see, on the other hand, where having some kind of a barrier that is a little better or lasts longer than just cedar fencing, which is put up a lot to save cost. And I really, really, really would like to see if the developer can somehow work a little more closely with even a hybrid version. I think I saw in some of the pictures that there's some brick and then maybe some coyote fencing that's in there. So after hearing the public comment time and time again, I know that it's not really to this commission. I know we have the ability to require or make that a condition of approval. My question to staff would be, is there somewhere in the Jackson approval, was it required to put the wall, or was it something that the developer offered for that subdivision?
Chair, did you want me to answer that question for this?
If you have recollection, and Orlin has her hand up also, so.
Okay, yeah, I do have recollection. It was not a requirement to build that wall. I think the developer built that wall themselves. I think Orlin was actually the engineer on that project, so she can probably tell you the cost affixed with that and how that may play out. But I also just would like to remind the commission that the commission and their decision-making in any kind of conditions that they place on this, they're bound by code, and they would not be able to require a block wall by our code. So I just wanted to remind the commission of that as this conversation moves forward.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. Orland, you concur with
Yes,
anything you want to add?
yes, Commissioner. Next generation.
I need to go ahead and swear you in, please.
Sure.
Ms. Gudetto Ortiz, do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
It's Orlin Gadet Ortiz, and my office address at Design Ingenuity is I'm with Design Ingenuity. The office address is 1421 Louisa Street. And I am the project engineer for Next Generations Project Jackson that you referred to. That project, Next Generation, they're contractors, owners, developers, and they're able to build walls at really reasonable prices because they're not hiring outside contractors to do it. They're using their own people, and their developments generally have walls around them. They come in and assume from the beginning they're going to put a wall up. They believe in it. But it was their proposal before staff even saw the project.
Thank you. So you're saying that there would be a big cost difference or a cost difference between the Jackson subdivision and this because of in-house contracting versus subcontracting?
Yeah.
And do you know what the cost was for Jackson per linear foot, or?
I would imagine, assuming that they're not putting stucco on it, that they would be able to hit the numbers that Mr. Trujillo stated, which is about $65 a linear foot. But I think that it's more typical to pay closer to $20 per height of wall. So a 6-foot wall times $20 is $120 a linear foot. Those are the prices I normally see my clients pay.
Thank you, Orlin.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Garcia, you still have the floor.
So again, going back to, now I guess I can redirect a question to Mr. Burke in terms of making the statement that the code does not allow us as a commission to make a wall a condition of approval. Is that correct?
Chair, Commissioners, Commissioner Garcia, that is correct.
And such though, us being a quasi-judicial board, saying that this commission, let's just take, for example, if we do want them to have the wall on behalf of the association, and if it was something that was agreed upon to them, and then this commission would deny the project based on that. I mean, I think that's going kind of far, but I think it's within the range of this commission to kind of have that discussion. This wall has been something that is time and time again. I mean, the public comment, that's mostly all what it's been about. Let's just take, for example, another reason why possibly a wall of some sort, going back to crime. There's quite a lot of crime in that area, in Las Acequias. I live in Tierra Contenta, and we have a huge problem with people walking up and down our streets, breaking into cars. And so back again to the discussion of security and aesthetics of the area. This isn't the first infill project that's come across our, sorry guys, I have my door open. The first infill project that we looked at, and the majority of them all have a wall. And so what makes this project any less different than the others? I'll go ahead and stop there. If there's any other commissioners that have questions, just point of discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Garcia. Commissioner Faulkner, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. So just so we can get the legal opinion from Sally. Sally, is there any place in the code where we can require this, or that we have the authority to require something like this?
Thank you, Chair Gutierrez, Commissioner Faulkner. I'm looking at the subdivision criteria, And I don't really see that any of them contemplate this. Certainly, this is something that perhaps our code could be amended to require. Subdivision needs to meet all of our subdivision standards and design requirements. I think our code could include some sort of wall requirement if it was amended, but the way it stands now, there's no requirement or trigger. And I'm really not seeing, I'm not seeing a place where I would hook it in. And, you know, if the commissioners view it otherwise, I would encourage you to look at those subdivision criteria and think about, you know, where you could hook a condition like this in, if you think it's appropriate and required by one of the subdivision approval criteria. That's certainly your job to do that.
So two things. One, because the code doesn't specifically mention it, would that inhibit us from doing it? Does it prohibit us making a decision like that?
So, I mean, if you were to impose a condition, you would have to find, I think that it's, like if there's infrastructure that's required to support the subdivision, that's the kind of stuff that you can impose as a condition. So if, you know, if the infrastructure is not sufficient to support the subdivision based on our code requirements, those are the types of conditions that are appropriate to impose.
And then one other question. So in our criteria for approval of different projects, I know that there, and I can never remember the exact words, but there is one criteria around public safety, welfare, the good of, it's something like that.
Commissioner Faulkner, I'm not sure if you might be thinking perhaps of the development plan criteria, speak a little more broadly of public interest. There's a public interest criterion in that. The subdivision criteria don't have a similar concept. Of course, all of our ordinances are adopted for the furtherance of public health, safety, and welfare. And in interpreting our code, the commission should consider an interpretation that meets those goals and the city's police power. But in terms of these subdivision criteria, just quick review. The first one is about due regard for natural features, vegetation, watercourses, historical sites, etc. The second criterion is the opinions of public agencies. And it says, if it determines that in the best interest, so it's in here, but here's what it says. If the commission determines that it is in the best interest of the public health, safety, or welfare, the land is not suitable for platting or development purposes of the kind proposed. So that's to, you know, if other agencies think this land isn't suitable for this type of development, that's a condition, a criterion. Talks about, you know, this is the one that talks about flooding and other, you know, hazards like that. The third criterion talks about compliance with all standards of Chapter 14. So that's the one that gets you to really any of our infrastructure standards, any of our design standards, architectural standards, if those, well, those don't really play in here. But the fourth criterion is the plat shall not be approved if it creates a nonconformity or increases a nonconformity. The fifth criterion also speaks to nonconformities. So, I mean, those are the criteria that apply to this type of project. They definitely have to meet all of our Chapter 14 standards. If the commission thinks that a condition is required, necessitated in terms of infrastructure, I think those are appropriate. Outside of that, I'm not sure if I see a place here for adding a condition like this.
So another follow-up question to that is, it seems to me that there's some very specific criteria that apply to different kinds of development, but then we're charged with broader concepts to consider, and public safety and in the interest of the public is one of those broader concepts. It may not be a specific concept, but within the code, it is something that we're asked to consider of all projects.
Certainly in terms of like long range planning, recommendations to the governing body, ways to amend the code, bigger policy issues, yes, your duties do include some of those concepts for sure. Growth, infrastructure management, but those are much more forward-looking policy-based duties. I think in terms of reviewing a project that's a specific type of project with specific criteria, those are generally, you refer to the specific section for subdivision approval in reviewing and evaluating a subdivision.
All right, and so could you just read the criteria in this the criteria for this specific case around subdivisions? Could you read the one again that does mention public interest and welfare?
Sure, and I do read it to be kind of, let's see if it's just there. I'm going to share my screen. I think you should be seeing the staff report. So the one I was looking at, and I think this is in terms of giving due regard to the opinions of public agencies, and shall not approve the plat if it determines that in the best interest of the public health, safety, or welfare, the land is not suitable for platting and development purposes of the kind proposed. So that would be some of that somewhat broader language that you're looking for. And it is yours to interpret and apply. You've got staff's recommendation of how they would apply it here in the packet.
All right, and then thank you, Sally, so much. And then the other question I had is that, is there some place, and I guess this is a question for the developer and the association, you know, just because a development is going in doesn't necessarily mean that crime is going to increase. You know, some could argue that walls are divisive and prevent community building, as much as someone could argue that they're a good methodology for protecting neighborhoods against crime, etc. But has anyone even had a dialogue about sharing the cost of the wall? Because the developer doesn't have to do this necessarily, and it's up to each commissioner to decide whether or not the developer has to do this. There's nothing that says that we necessarily have the authority to require this. And the cost of doing a fence versus a wall is considerable. It may only be like $35 more a linear foot or whatever, but you take that over the length of an entire project and it gets quite costly. And so has there been any dialogue about cost sharing on the wall to kind of alleviate, to kind of help bring some consensus to the wall discussion? And I would like ask Fabian, or I guess Carl Sumner.
I hear somebody here, but I don't know who is it.
It was me. It was me.
Okay. Oh, hold on real quick, Mr. Sumner.
Sure thing.
Commissioner Faulkner, is that your question?
Yeah, that's a question. Has there been a consideration of cost sharing between the association who's requesting the wall and the developer?
Okay, but Mr. Trujillo, we've closed the public hearing. So for him to answer again, we'd have to reopen the public hearing.
Mr. Chair, I think I recall, if I can just interject for 1 second, we talked about this on the previous meeting, and the association said there wasn't really any funds. They don't have any funds to do something like that, if I can recall properly. And so it would be kind of hard to throw that on the association as well. And I'll yield the floor.
Thank you, Commissioner Garcia. Mr. Burke.
Thank you, Chair. Just kind of, again, going before we get into the discussion of the conversations that had happened, I just wanted to circle back to Commissioner Faulkner's kind of question and stuff. So the code says that we can require quasi-public improvements, and public and quasi-public improvements. And generally speaking, that means those are stipulated in the code. There's an infrastructure section. The only place in the code where it talks about walls is for screening and buffering against non-residential zones. When a residential zone abuts a non-residential zone, that's when we can require a wall or a fence, or the combination of both, and also in the landscaping sections against parking lots. But when we get into, does this promote the health, safety, and welfare? That's kind of one of those areas that when we're doing a general plan amendment, when we're doing a rezone criteria, that's where we really get into the tied into the general plan themes and stuff like that. But this is the final subdivision plat, and kind of the evaluation criteria here is that it's consistent with what the preliminary subdivision plat was proposed and also shown to the commission as it was approved by the commission on January 7th, 2021. So, just wanted to bring those points up just in case that was clear or unclear. And usually we take financial guarantees for public or quasi-public improvements, which tends to be landscaping, water, sewer, drainage ponds, as well as streets and sidewalks. So just wanted to let you know.
Mr. Chair, follow up.
Yes, you still have the floor.
But there's nothing in the code that would prohibit us from requiring this wall.
Chair, Commissioner Faulkner, I think that the powers and duties of the Planning Commission are written under the Planning Commission section. So I don't think it says you can require any type of improvements that aren't already required by code, going above and beyond. And I would defer to Sally to weigh in a little bit more on the specifics and the legality of it, as I know that she was concerned with kind of the language that's written in there.
Chair Gutierrez, Commissioner Faulkner, the way I read the criterion about public interest that we were just looking at, public safety and welfare, is it really speaks to the type of development proposed. And here it's a single family residential subdivision. And I don't know if that gets down to the nuts and bolts of with or without a wall. To me, I think that's not how I would necessarily interpret it, but I would just encourage the commission to, read the criterion and apply it, because that's really needs to be the guidepost.
Okay, all right. And I know this sounds like a redundant or pointless line of questioning, but there are some laws that are written to like if it's purposeful exclusion, that means that it was intended to exclude. Like if it's not mentioned specifically, that means you cannot do it. And so that's what I'm trying to get at. And it doesn't sound like this is a case of that kind of legislating or law. So that's why I was asking. Some law precludes purposefully.
I think that the city could adopt further regulations regarding walls, and then certainly they would apply. I don't think there's anything precluding the city as legislative policymaking matter to adopt those kinds of wall rules. It's just that I don't think we don't have any now, except as relates to those separating residential areas from non-residential.
All right, that's it, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Faulkner. Secretary Clow, you have the floor.
Yes, I just wanted to say that, we have to look at this from both perspectives, not only the people that are currently living there, but the owner of the property, the developer of the property. They also have rights. And when we say that there's nothing saying we can't do it, that's not necessarily true. We can't impose on developers added cost because neighbors think that would provide a better environment for them. We just legally don't have the ability to require, and I look at this as a case of aesthetics, that we don't have the ability to require the developer to do things that the code does not require them to do. And 2 weeks ago, we listened to three different talks about the need for affordable housing in this town, that when we drag out these projects, it adds more cost. When we require certain things to be done, or we go back and forth, and this has been going on for quite a long period of time with this developer. I mean, they first came in and they wanted to do real affordable homes because they wanted to do manufactured homes, which legally they have every right to do. But they worked with the neighbors and they worked with the city and agreed not to do those. And at some point, it's time to move on and not continue to add cost. Walls are extremely expensive. And if we're looking at, we can't even say that you need a wall for public health and safety or that, whereas a fence would do. Now, the developer has agreed to do a Japanese cedar fence. In my opinion, they're not legally required to do it, but they're, again, doing something they didn't have to do, like giving up on manufactured homes, and have agreed to do a fence. And a fence might not be as long lasting, although I think, we looked at the photos of the fences that are along some of those property lines and they're still there. Wood fences last longer than 5 years. But it does provide the barrier that the neighbors are saying that they're requiring. And again, it's problematic for me that costs keep getting added on, projects keep getting sent back, more time is having to be looked at when we're looking at affordable houses. And, in those talks that we were hearing, they were saying that when we, compromise it, where someone wants 6 houses per lot, but then we listen to the neighbors and they only want, or per acre, and they only want 5, and we require that, we are increasing the cost of homes every time we do that. And this wall would provide substantial increase in cost. And a lot of people in this town that need housing can't afford that. And if there's 200 and some houses in this development, the existing development, how many of those houses have stone walls between them? It's just, I'm not getting the fact that neighborhoods have a really hard time extending and opening up to expanding their neighborhoods to include new homes. Like, I don't see the definition of why this can't be just part of this old neighborhood. So, I'm opposed to any kind of block wall. I think that the developer has made many concessions here, big concessions. And I don't think legally we can require them to do a block wall. And I think probably what we need to do is thank them for agreeing to do a wooden fence. That's all I have.
Thank you, Secretary Clow. Commissioner Faulkner, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I would just have to echo what Commissioner Clow was saying. Their fences last a long time. And the fence would serve the same purpose as the wall, only it would not be as prohibitive in costs. The difference between a fence and a wall in cost is huge. And so can I ask the developer a question?
Yes, please.
So when you made a commitment to do a barrier of some kind, did you commit to a wall or did you commit to just a barrier of some kind?
Commissioner, when we first met, we did not discuss a barrier of sorts. There was a time where Mr. Rodriguez, who was he's actually the owner of Casa de Toros subdivision, not of this one. There are 2 Rodriguez's. Yes, they're father, son, but they're 2 separate applications. We did meet with the neighborhood association at one point. And at that time, Mr. Rodriguez, Rudy Jr., did mention that he would consider putting up a block wall. But after looking at the cost of a block wall, it did not make sense to do so because we had gone from manufactured housing, larger lots, the smaller lots with more infrastructure. So that's why we're back here, and we have talked it over many times, and we came up with a barrier-based recommendations, not only from the Casa de Todos preliminary plat subdivision application, but also that we come up with a barrier, and the barrier that we came up with is this Japanese cedar fence, which is actually a very good fence that will a lot longer than your normal cedar fence. And so that's why we were at this juncture right now, where we are more than happy to provide that without any cost sharing at all. So,
Okay.
And we also provide affordable housing. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, commissioners, anybody else have any questions? I don't see any hands up. Mr. Logston, were you able to find your area where you thought it might have mentioned manufactured homes or no? Or it needed to be deleted?
Yes, Chairman Gutierrez, if you'd like to see that, I can bring up the covenants. I had it as one of my exhibits rather than titled covenants, so I just wasn't seeing it. But I will show this now. Let me expand the window, then I'll share it.
And you'll see to it that that gets fixed before.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. You should see this now. These are and it says big as day, their draft. So we'll absolutely correct it. But once again, in the beginning of Article 3, right here at the very start, all residents shall be site-built homes. I don't do a full review of these covenants at this time. It certainly gets reviewed before recordation, but primarily D, Beingessner is making sure that their grading and drainage provisions and so forth are in the covenants. That's kind of what we're really looking at. But at any rate, all residences shall be site-built homes. And then down here in Article 4, I think somehow I blipped over, where is it? Section 3 here, approved structures, where this is old language from the original draft covenants. And it says tract C1 and C2 may be general wood frame. I think my eyes locked in on wood frame, or HUD approved modular prefabricated manufactured homes. So once again, that will get corrected. And I think also one reason I just wasn't seeing that is because I came down here and you see tract B1 to conform with subdivision on north side must be general wood frame construction. So it was just an oversight. The applicant missed it too. We will correct it. Once again, I showed that plat note where it's requiring it, and we will absolutely correct this.
Thank you, Mr. Logston. Commissioners, anybody else? If nobody else wants to speak, I'll take a motion.
Commissioner Clow will make a motion.
Please.
I move that we approve the final subdivision for case number 2021-3177, subject to the conditions of approval and technical corrections recommended by staff, which would include red cedar Japanese fence, and I believe it's on the west boundary. Is that correct?
And if I can clarify, Commissioner Clow and Chairman, we did, because we weren't really sure how the negotiations went and so forth, I want to point out that we actually did not put a fence or wall on here as a condition. So you'll want to add that now and incorporate it into your motion. But it is the east side of the subdivision.
East side. Okay, yes, I am. I noticed that it's not one of the conditions. That's why I said it. And in addition to a red cedar Japanese fence on the north side, you said?
East side, Commissioner.
East side. Oh, east side of the property.
Commissioner Faulkner to second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair, can I ask if the motion maker and the second would be willing to make a motion for both case 2021-3177 and 2021-3183 at the same time, since they both require the same condition?
Sure,
Yes.
I'm fine. Yes.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Seeing none, if we can have a.
Mayor Gutierrez.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Commissioner
I was
Ceteni.
I was either going to do this before or after it, but I will still not be voting in favor because I do not believe that this project meets criterion number 3. And then all plats comply with chapter 14, article 9 regarding connectivity as discussed and the preliminary subdivision plat approval. So I just wanted to state that for the record.
Okay. Thank you. Any other commissioners? Any other discussion? Seeing none, if we can have a roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Chavez,
Yes.
Commissioner Clow,
Yes.
Commissioner Faulkner,
Yes.
Commissioner Garcia,
Yes.
Commissioner Lawrence,
Yes.
Commissioner Picarello,
Yes.
Commissioner Zatania.
No.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. Now we need to go with the findings of fact and conclusion of law.
Yes, Commissioner Clow moves for the approval of the findings of facts and and conclusions of law for case numbers 2021-3177 and 2021-3183.
Mr. Chair, do the findings and facts include the fence?
No, they don't. So with the added provision that the findings, that the conditions of approval include a Japanese cedar fence on the east property line.
And staff can insert that condition prior to signature and filing.
All right,
Yes.
Commissioner Faulkner to second.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. Any discussion, Commission? Seeing none, if we can have a roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Chavez,
Yes.
Commissioner Clow,
Yes.
Commissioner Faulkner,
Yes.
Commissioner Garcia,
Yes.
Commissioner Lawrence,
Yes.
Commissioner Picarello,
Yes.
Commissioner Catania.
No.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The motion has been approved.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chair, can I explain my vote?
Yes, please.
I think it's important. I hope the community understands that we're charged with not only considering the wants and needs of community, but also the realities of development. And so for myself, I felt like this was a good compromise because the community got a barrier that they wanted, but the developer was not penalized with an excess of costs to accomplish that goal. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Okay, moving on. Staff communications. And the first thing from staff communications is ethics and open government training. Ms. Paez, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Members of the commission, I do have a PowerPoint. I think it takes me about 30 minutes to talk through this. I'll try to be fast. And I am not opposed to folks asking questions as we go along or when we're finished. You know, I'm kind of informal by nature, so if anyone wants to chime in, that's great. As a very quick introduction, we are supposed to do this once a year. The city attorney's office is supposed to provide the boards and commissions with these trainings. We're a little overdue, so my apologies on that, and I'm glad we can go through it tonight. So we are going to hit a few things here. Is my screen sharing in a way that's a weird size for you all because I have kind of an unusual size screen. Okay, let me know if you're not seeing it well and I can adjust it. So we're going to cover the two main open government statutes that do apply to the commission and its work. We're going to do a quick overview of some of the main things in the code of ethics that apply to this group. And then I've got a few tidbits on quasi-judicial proceedings and Robert's Rules of Order. So the sunshine laws, in New Mexico, we have the Open Meetings Act and the Inspection of Public Records Act. So we're going to do a quick overview of those two statutes. And the way those are written, they have the same purpose. And the purpose of both is to provide people with the greatest possible information about government affairs and the official acts of officials and employees. A representative government is dependent upon an informed electorate. And so the Open Meetings Act, and this should all be very familiar because this is what we do every couple weeks. The purpose is to ensure that the formation of public policy and the conduct of government business occurs in a forum open to the public. And the primary rule is that if there is a quorum present and you're meeting to formulate public policy, discuss public business, or take actions by vote, any person must be allowed to attend and listen. And so, of course, we do always allow public comment, and our code says it's encouraged, but the Open Meetings Act itself does not create a right to comment, just to be present and listen. A quorum, as you know, is more than half. We're a commission of 9 here, so a quorum is 5. And I think you're all aware of the sort of rolling quorum concept. So if, up to 5 of you discuss the same topic off the record, but it's in 3 separate text message conversations or email chains, that is actually 5 of you discussing the same issue of public business as a quorum, and that is not allowed under the Open Meetings Act. So just a reminder to be careful. It's okay to talk, one-on-one, but as these conversations start to sort of spill out amongst yourselves, we can get into trouble with that. So it's always good to do most all our public business at the meetings, of course. You all know about the agendas. They have to give the date, time, and location. Open Meetings Act requires that to be up 72 hours before the meeting. We have other rules actually that require for public hearings, we need to publish an agenda 15 days out in the newspapers. So the 72-hour rule for us is really a cutoff to kind of take things off, postpone things, add things that don't require the 15-day notice because they're not public hearings. Minutes. Melissa takes beautiful minutes. She goes above and beyond, I think, the requirements of the statute, but we need to have the date, time, and place of meeting, who was present and absent, the substance of the proposals considered, a record of the decisions made, how each member voted, and those are supposed to be prepared within 10 days and approved at the next meeting. We try to substantially comply with that. Sometimes there's practical limitations that cause a little slowdown. There are exceptions that allow us to go into a closed or executive session. I think relevant to this group, the only time that we could really, I think that really is, makes sense for the commission would be deliberating on a case. I don't generally encourage that. I think for the most part, you all do a very good job of deliberating on the record, but the act does allow us to close that. And the thing is, we don't always have that set up. So we would need like a separate room or a separate Zoom room or something. You would make a motion, say I move to go into executive session to deliberate on the case. That could be seconded. We could go talk in a different room, come back and still vote on the record and say, we only talked about the matter we said we were going to talk about. And then the minutes need to reflect that as well. So I don't think this group has done that since I've been here, but it is theoretically an option. Reconvened meetings. So postponing, you all know that we can postpone, and between the Open Meetings Act and our code, if you postpone at a meeting to a subsequent meeting and you say we're going to postpone to the next meeting, that kind of gets us around having to do a new agenda in the newspaper 15 days out. So especially in a situation where we have a public hearing and you want to carry it over, if we keep putting it on agendas and saying we're going to postpone, and you say it on the record at this meeting, you're going to postpone to the next meeting, that's a good way to keep the notice out there because anybody attending the meeting knows we've postponed. We can, and that previous slide also kind of contemplates, you know, if we had like a gas leak at City Hall or a snowstorm or something, and you wanted to say, come back 3 days later or something like that. That's another thing that could be done under the appropriate circumstances. Remote attendance is somewhat limited actually under the Act. And obviously we've been doing this throughout COVID, and I've got a slide on that, but we need to have first, city code has to allow it separately from just the statute. And it has to be difficult or impossible for the member to attend the meeting in person. I think certainly the public health emergency has covered all of us for that in this situation. And I mean, we're all experts on this now. We need to know who's talking. We all need to hear each other. The public needs to hear everybody. So we've really got good practice on this. If we go back to City Hall in a hybrid format or something, it's going to be very important to make sure we can identify speakers. Everyone can hear everyone else. So we have adopted, the city has basically adopted the State Riot Act as a charter city. We've adopted the State Riot Act and given the mayor kind of those full powers. And as a result, the mayor can declare an emergency, and our specific emergency declarations ordinance allows virtual meetings during a declared emergency. And this is the provision that has allowed us to meet on Zoom during the whole pandemic. And so it does right now depend on us being in a state of emergency for us to continue meeting on Zoom. And if the declared state of emergency goes away, we could either maybe adopt a new ordinance allowing virtual attendance if it's still consistent with the Open Meetings Act, or else we are going to be back at City Hall. And we've been following Attorney General guidance in meeting remotely on Zoom. I think all these bullet points we've been doing, we always do a roll call so that everyone knows who's present, the public knows who's present. The speakers must identify themselves and be audible. You all are very good at saying who you are when you make your motions and everything, and that's great. We're providing remote access for the public. Suspend meeting during technical difficulties, and as you know, we're trying very hard when we have problems to kick people out, bring them back in, wait for folks to get their audio going. So taking all actions by roll call vote, which as you know we've been doing, and make and retain a video or recording. And if you haven't ever been to City of Santa Fe 2 on the YouTube, we have our City of Santa Fe 2 channel as land use. All of our meetings are there. So Zoom meetings are just a modern seance. There's someone who wants to join us. Elizabeth, are you there? We can't hear you. I just thought that one was funny because that's how it is every couple weeks. So there are some enforcement and penalty provisions in the statute. It requires a substantial compliance, so we don't always have to be perfect. We try to check all the boxes all the time. Little deviations, kind of forgiven under the law. There's a presumption that you all are following the statute, but the statute can be enforced by the Attorney General, by the district attorneys, and by private individuals, and those kinds of lawsuits can result in costs and attorney's fees paid by the city. If you were to make a decision in violation of the Open Meetings Act, like a decision that was improperly noticed or something like that, that could be deemed invalid. And there's actual criminal penalties too. So if someone violated the statute with criminal intent, like intentionally violated the law, there's even a potential to be convicted of a misdemeanor. And I don't know how often, if ever, that's been done by our district attorneys, but just to know that there is a little bit of teeth in the law. So we'll move on to IPRA. And this is the procedure and enforcement mechanism that ensures people can access public records. Again, this is, so it's, you know, often at the city, we feel like this is a big burden and kind of an unfunded mandate. And I will tell you that the City of Santa Fe's volume of IPRA requests is enormous. We've compared our numbers to Albuquerque. I think we actually get more IPRA requests than Albuquerque, even though we're a much, much smaller municipality, or at least proportionally. We get a huge amount of these, and they're very burdensome on staff. They take a ton of time. But the legislature has determined that this is an essential function of a representative government. that the city absolutely has a duty to do this and that this is an integral part of our routine duties. So try to remind folks of this, and we do our best to get through those requests. And pretty much everything that comes into the city becomes a public record. Documents, papers, letters, books, maps, anything that we get, even if we're not required to keep it, it becomes a public record if it relates to public business. So there are some exceptions. For example, attorney-client privileged information. If you email me anything requesting legal advice or recommendations in that sort of attorney-client role, those emails are screened out. The folks that do our email searches, they flag all the ones with lawyers on them, they screen them out, they send them to me if they're not sure. So know that we do withhold those documents, but for the most part, everything we've got is a public record. This does include email, this does include text messages, this includes public business on your personal email accounts. If you're, emailing about planning commission, that could become a public record. So just be careful what you put in writing. We've got a records custodian. She's actually in the city attorney's office, and she is responsible for sort of rounding all these records up all the time. She takes in the requests, she responds to them, she provides access to the records as quickly as she can. Written requests are the only requests that are enforceable. So you could make an oral request. You could say, hey, Noah, can you send me this thing? And he could do that for you, but that's not going to be an enforceable IPRA request unless you actually file the written request with the records custodian. But once those do come in as a written request, we do need to respond within 3 days. Often that 3-day letter is, we're working on it. Sometimes it's, hey, you just wanted one little thing. It was easy and here it is. But we do need to provide all of the records requested unless it's an excessively burdensome or broad request. I think we do have one right now where there's something like 10,000 emails were picked up. We've got an email scraping software, and somebody asked for like all emails relating to the Midtown campus. I think that's one literally generated 10,000 emails that they are going through in batches. So those clearly we cannot get out in 15 days because we have about, 1.5 employees working on it. But so your role in the process, we'll let you know that you've been identified as a possible source of records. Let us know that you need a little bit of time. We'll communicate if we've got deadlines, and you just turn over whatever you've got that's responsive. And again, we do redact attorney-client privileged information, things that aren't related at all to the city, things that are completely irrelevant. And the emails, again, if you're emailing city staff, our scraper will pick that stuff up. So we're not even probably going to ask you for it. Consequences for violations. Again, there are some teeth in the statute. Again, they're really consequences for the city, not so much for you personally. There's no criminal penalty in this context, but there is a $100 a day fine, basically, that the courts can impose on the city if we haven't responded timely. And folks can also sue us and obtain a lot of attorney's fees because litigating these can take a lot of time. And so in addition to damages and costs, the city can end up paying a lot of attorney's fees. So just a few miscellaneous takeaways. The city doesn't have to create records. So if somebody wants like a spreadsheet of all affordable housing projects in the city of Santa Fe and Noah and Lee haven't created such a thing, then we don't have to put one together for folks. It's just, what do we already have? We're only required to provide copies in the existing format. So we don't necessarily need to scan things in. We can say, oh, you can come in and look at the plats, or you can, so let's see, electronic copies, though, we do try to provide those whenever we can. We've seen some recent litigation in New Mexico where courts have awarded attorney's fees of up to $400 an hour. And if you have an attorney spending many dozens of hours on a lawsuit, that can really add up. And there's a little tiny town called Jal, New Mexico. They recently had a lawsuit by their community newspaper alleging that officials had withheld documents. They settled it for $400,000, which was 1/10 of their annual budget. just to give you an idea of, this was their negotiation, this was their good deal. So this can be very costly for the city, which is why we do try very hard. One of the reasons, the real reason is that we want to provide the records, but also there are a lot of really serious consequences. So code of ethics is in our ordinances. It does apply to quasi-judicial volunteer commission members. And it basically says that the proper operation of our government requires public officials to be independent, impartial, responsible to the people. We want to avoid conflicts of interest. We want to avoid folks using public office or employment for personal gain. And we want to make sure the public has confidence in the integrity of its government. So those are the goals of our code of ethics. There is a pretty hard and fast rule that says a public official shall not perform an official act or attempt to influence another person to perform an official act in any matter in which the public official has a conflict of interest. So those are always going to be cases where you should recuse. But conflict of interest as used here has a really specific definition, and it speaks about money. So the conflict of interest that's always recused is if there's some prospect of you gaining or losing money based on the outcome of a case. Unless it's really de minimis, not a big deal, shared with a lot of other people, super speculative. But if there is a specific and identifiable prospect, those are the cases where you should recuse. And it's not just a gain or loss to you, it includes your family members, and then businesses owned by you or a household member. It applies to your employer, client, or customer that has paid more than $500 in the preceding year. So if it's your boss or your client, keep an eye out for those. Groups, labor unions, organizations that you are a part of that could stand to gain or lose money. Or we don't really care about campaigns here since you all are volunteers doing this as a matter of public service, but there's also rules if they've been contributing to a campaign. So there's also rules against improper gifts. Any person or entity that could gain or lose money as a result of your official acts and your decision-making should not be giving you gifts. So that's a problem. That's a conflict. You should not accept those things. There are some little exceptions though. You can accept a burrito, you can go to lunch with your old friend, you can accept a public award, you can still take out loans, you can still do normal services and sales, just not gifts unless they are a non-pecuniary gift up to $50. The city does have an ethics and campaign review board, and they are in a position to enforce our ethics code. They issue advisory opinions. So if you ever had a question about whether future conduct might violate the code of ethics, I don't know how often these get submitted or what the turnaround time is, but know that it's an option and it's one of their duties. They receive and investigate complaints about violations of the code of ethics. They have the authority to issue public reprimands and impose fines of up to $500, and they have the authority to refer matters to the district attorney for criminal prosecution if there's a violation of criminal law. So that's it on ethics. There's a lot more in there, but that's, I think, the things that are most relevant to land use boards. Meeting procedure. There's a lot of things that govern our procedure. And so sometimes if you ask me a question and I'm a little slow, one of the reasons is that I'm trying to apply a lot of different filters. The highest, most important thing that we always have to meet are constitutional requirements. And that usually means due process of law. So I'm always thinking, well, is this consistent with the due process rights of our applicant? Are there other constitutional considerations? Below that, we've got state law that we need to follow, so the Open Meetings Act. We've got the city ordinances that we need to follow that provide a lot of procedural requirements. And then we've got city resolutions. We've got committee rules. We've got appeal procedures. And to the extent that the Roberts Rules of Order are not in conflict with those things, we will apply Robert's rules. That's kind of the general default. But if any of those other things provide an additional layer of procedure, we have to follow the highest authority. So quasi judicial acts. So this is going back to that due process thing in the Constitution. New Mexico law has cases talking about this. Federal courts have issued a lot of decisions on this too, but the constitutions require additional standards of conduct for public officials acting in a quasi-judicial capacity. So those standards prohibit actions tainted by conflicts of interest, bias and prejudice, prejudgment, or other conduct creating the actuality or the appearance of impropriety. And that's actually in our code, but it's based on legal principles. And looking at the appearance of impropriety, I'm always happy to talk about those questions with you. I think generally we're gonna go back to like, would reasonable people think that this looks unfair, that looks like I'm biased and prejudiced? And you can evaluate those things, and it's ultimately the commissioner's decision about whether or not recusal is warranted, but I'm always happy to talk through those questions because there's a bit of, it might be gray area in there. There are some things that are not gray though, that are spelled out real clearly by the code. Members of a land use board cannot communicate with an interested party outside of the public hearing concerning the merits of the case. So direct people to staff, have them submit their comments through the public hearing process, through our written comment process, but you can't talk about them outside of the hearing. The code also precludes inspecting the site of a subject property, and this is based on law that basically says in a quasi-judicial proceeding, you need to make your decision based on the information presented at the hearing. Similar to court, the judge and the jurors, they're not allowed to say, oh, you know, I've seen this crime scene or I've driven past this house and I know all about it, so I'm going to base my decision on that. You have to base it on the evidence presented by the police officer and taken in by the prosecutor and all that stuff. So there are some things you can do. Of course, you can talk to staff outside of the public hearing. Staff's here as your subject matter experts to help make recommendations, to help you understand the code and land use principles. So of course, you can talk to them. The code allows for publicly noticed site visits. We would post that as a notice and folks could tag along in their car if they wanted to, members of the public. The historic board has traditionally done these. The planning commission has not. We could, so something to keep in mind, potentially an option. And of course you can ask me for legal advice or recommendations. Going back to sort of recusal, the code says that if you have received communications from an interested party outside the public hearing, you're supposed to disclose that communication on the record. So at the beginning of the case, you would say, I was contacted by somebody and they told me all this stuff about the case. I told them I couldn't talk to them and it's not going to affect my decision. So you should make those disclosures in an appropriate case. And if that information has affected your ability to be fair and impartial, you should go ahead and recuse yourself. That third bullet point goes back again to that gray area. Would a reasonable person think it's unethical for me to hear this case? And if so, perhaps I should recuse myself. So again, happy to talk about those. And finally, last topic I just want to touch on is Robert's rules. I've been trying to get a little better at these. We've had a few things lately that have come up and trying to become a better expert for you all, but I also want you all to be experts amongst yourselves a little bit too. So you all know what a motion is: formal proposal to take action. The main motion is usually whether to approve or deny a case or maybe postpone the case. And the way that the rules are set up, and we don't always do it this way, and I think that we can and perhaps should consider whether we want to get a little more formal this way, is that you would make a motion before any debate. So I think what Robert's Rules contemplates is that you would get the information from staff, get the information from the applicant, allow for the public comment, ask the kind of clarifying questions, but before sort of diving into your opinions about a case, somebody should put a motion on the floor to sort of open the debate. So somebody says, I move to approve the case. You can withdraw that or modify it before a second is made. And if there's a second, then the chair typically should sort of state the motion. We've got a motion and a second, and that would open the floor for debate. With regard to making a second, and this actually came up today, you can second a motion and still vote against it. So the motion, by seconding a motion, you're sort of saying, I think this is something that should be debated. I'm ready to open this up for discussion. So just because you've seconded something doesn't mean you're roped into it. And we should only have one main motion pending at a time. So once those things are open, it's on the floor, it's open for debate. Typically, the chair should allow the motion maker to speak first, which you all generally do as a matter of course, and then recognize other speakers in the order that they raise their hands. I know Chair Gutierrez has been following this as pretty well, especially considering the Zoom format. So that's really how this group has operated, which is great. The general rule is that each member may speak twice. Typically, you should let everyone talk once before diving in for a second bite at the apple. And there's sort of a general rule in Robert's rules that you shouldn't speak longer than 10 minutes on a question. So some sort of general rules for efficient meeting running, which are great. And the rules do remind us that we need to stick to the merits of the proposed action, stick to germane topics, and debate issues, not personalities. This group is very courteous and very professional, very good at respecting the person who has the floor, very good at directing questions and comments through the floor. And that is great. So keep it up. Secondary motions are sort of those that help us deal with the main motion that's already on the floor. So you want to amend it, you can move to amend it. You want to postpone it, you want to lay it on the table, you want to have a recess, all those kinds of little things that come up while you're in the process of debating a motion or secondary motions. There's some super complicated rules about like which motions are in order and which ones should be decided first. And I think that's a level of detail we probably don't care about, but those rules are out there. Let's see, motion to limit debate. That's an option. If it's 11 o'clock at night and you think maybe everybody should get 2 more minutes to talk, but you'd like to wrap it up, you can try to limit and end the debate, and you can do that with a 2/3 vote. So because it does kind of shut down the debate, some of these rules do require a 2/3 vote, so more than majority. And then this other one, motion to end debate and vote, is moving the previous question. And I think this one recently came up, and it was, I call the question, and the commission did vote unanimously to go ahead and call the question. So the right procedure was followed. I think sometimes folks have just sort of called that the end and voted on it. That's not really appropriate. So my apologies if I got that one wrong. You've seen me not be perfect before. You all did it right, so that was great. Again, this is a 2/3 vote. I think that night it was unanimous. Putting the question is sort of like it's time to vote. So that's that final step when we're done debating. Are you ready for the question? And this, under the rules, the chair would announce the results of the vote. But of course, we've got Melissa, who does conduct our votes and usually announces the result of the motion. So that's kind of the last step. Voting, the outcome of your cases requires a majority vote of a quorum. There are, as we mentioned, some motions that require a majority vote, and for our purposes, it's not very many of them. Calling the question, limiting debate, reconsidering something that's already been decided unless there's previous notice. Like tonight, we rescinded, but with previous notice, you only need a majority vote. I think if Commissioner Clow had wanted to rescind something that wasn't on the agenda, that could be a problem under the Open Meetings Act, but under Robert's rules, that would also require a 2/3 vote. So the recommendation on those is just to give the previous notice. That gets us back to majority vote to pass. Under both Robert's rules and our committee rules, the chair only votes to make or break a tie, or if the vote is necessary to provide the number of votes required to take action. So if we have several folks out at a meeting, 3 of you are excused and you have a split vote, and we need to somehow get to a quorum to have a successful motion, that's one time when we would ask the chair to vote, or if he wanted to make or break a tie. No voting by proxy. And so handling a motion, I think y'all know this. I move, I second, it's been moved and seconded, you debate, ask question, and do the voting and the results. So correcting mistakes, kind of alluded to these already. Motion to reconsider is on the same night. So there's kind of two different paths. If you want to claw back an action that you've taken in the same meeting, there's different rules. So for this one, it's the same night and it has to be made by a member who voted on the winning side. So you just voted in favor of approving an application and you realize that there was some fact that you should have relied on and you've changed your mind. So you can make a motion to reconsider it, and it can be seconded and debated. And if it passes by a majority vote, it's like the motion's back on the table and you never voted on it. So you claw back the vote, you've got a pending motion, you can vote on it again. If it's later on, then we're in motion to rescind territory, and we're all experts on this now because we've done it. It's made at a subsequent meeting. Any member can do it. And if it's made with previous notice, it requires a majority vote. So we had previous notice by putting it on our agendas. And as I mentioned, I think it's important to always give notice if it's going to affect an applicant's case, because again, those are quasi-judicial cases with due process considerations. If you're trying to change a decision that doesn't directly affect a case like that, then potentially we could do without previous notice and a 2/3 vote, but it's kind of borderline under the Open Meetings Act. So always good to do the notice. Point of order is your way of saying we're not following the rules and I'd like to follow the rules. So you just raise a point of order anytime. This is one of the very rare situations where it's okay to interrupt the speaker or whoever has the floor. You can just, Chair, I've got a point of order, and the chair should immediately recognize those. There's no seconding, there's no debating. It's like, what's your point of order? And you say what it is, and the chair rules on it. And the chair can either say your point of order is well taken, in which case we're going to follow the procedure you're saying you want to follow, or I think you're wrong, we're going to keep going on the path we're going down. Briefly explain. Of course, I'm willing to weigh in on these things. If somebody calls a point of order and the chair requests a recommendation from me, from staff, we can do that. I always have my little books here. I've got the short version, the long version, we can look it up. So if we're in that kind of situation, feel free to call on me. But once the chair rules on whether a point of order is or is not well taken, that can be appealed. So you could say, I think the chair was wrong. I'd like to appeal, and if someone else seconds your appeal, you can all talk about it, and with a majority vote, you can overturn the chair's decision. So just to know that, you know, if you're not comfortable the rules are being followed, feel free to raise those anytime. Finally, custom. Custom is kind of the lowest level. I guess I could put it on my hierarchy, right? Below Robert's Rules of Order is we have sort of custom. And custom is when we just get into a habit of doing something, and that's always how we do it. And so I think one thing that I see a lot with some of our land use boards are friendly amendments often are just sort of raised whenever. And if nobody really cares, it's probably okay, and we always do it. But if a custom does violate the rules and it's pointed out, then we should revert to the written rules. So those are those situations where you would do a point of order. If a friendly amendment appears uncontroversial and we all are on the same page and we know it's being requested, and maybe somebody didn't state exactly super clearly everything they meant, but we're just clarifying and everybody's good with it, you know, we can just sort of declare it adopted and move on. But feel free to object to that stuff. So, you know, raise a point of order. If everything's working and y'all are following something that's not exactly Robert's Rules of Order, but we're functioning really well as a group, we're having efficient meetings, then we're accomplishing the objective of the procedural rules. So I'm not that uptight about it. So that's kind of the general overview, and I may have beat the 30-minute goal that I had, and I would entertain any questions you may have.
Thank you, Sally, for the presentation. I think it was a good presentation. Commissioners, questions? Commissioner Picarello.
Yes, when can we get the slides?
I'd be happy to email those right out.
Thank you.
Sure.
That's all.
Thank you, Commissioner Picarello. Commissioner Setenia.
I just want to know why Ms. Paez is so awesome at her job.
Thanks, Commissioner. I can't answer that, but I appreciate it, and you made me blush.
Hey, Chair, something that came up in another, when we were doing this training with the Board of Adjustment, was talking to the media and kind of policies around talking to the media, because you do get kind of asked sometimes. You might get reached out. The media might reach out to a commissioner, you know, before a meeting for their opinion on something. And Sally had an excellent answer that she brought up to the Board of Adjustment.
Do you remember what it was, Noah?
No, I don't.
So questions from the media. Under our rules, the chair does have the authority to speak on behalf of the commission. So if Chair Gutierrez gets a request from the Santa Fe New Mexican to talk about why did you rescind the Escarpa Apartments, and he's comfortable speaking on that, he does have authority to do that. He may prefer to refer such requests to staff, and that's probably a good idea. We can always ask for questions in writing and get staff's help answering them in writing. And we also have a new public information officer. His name is Dave Herndon, and he is also a great person to route media requests through, and in fact should always probably be kept in the loop on such things. So just probably reaching out to staff is a good first step on those, and looping in Dave. And when in doubt, we can decline, we can request written questions and respond in writing.
Any other commissioners?
I mean, I mostly just want to remind everyone of all these kind of filters and flags, right? And as these things come up, you know, and you're like, wait, I think we talked about this, feel free to reach out to me. But that's sort of the main scope of the kind of stuff that you all should feel free to bring to me anytime. So.
Thank you, Commissioner Faulkner.
Yeah, I would just like to see if we could somehow get Sally to do the presentation at the state level to lobbyists, because your presentation was so much faster and more concise. And really awesome job. I've had to sit through many of these and you rocked it. You hit all the right points without dragging it out to an unbearable timeline.
I got some slides that have been passed around and they were awful. They had like 10,000 words on a slide and there was way too many of them. And there was, it took me a long time to find the time to make it pretty though. So
yeah, awesome, Sally. That was awesome.
Oh, good. Thank you guys for your attention. I appreciate it.
Yep, awesome presentation. Thank you, Sally. Commissioner Setenia, go ahead.
I have one more question. This is my second time.
10 minutes, please.
Yeah, 10 minutes. That's actually my question, because you all know I like to talk a lot. And is this like an effort to put a leash on me? Like, what is the 10-minute limit? Is it after the motion? Because there's the motion and then it opens for discussion. But in terms of the presentation and asking questions of the developer, we're not necessarily limited to 10 minutes, because that seems like a little unreasonable for us to actually get the information that we need. So I just want to be clear about that.
Yeah, and the Robert's Rules of Order aren't specifically tailored to public hearings and quasi-judicial proceedings. The other thing that I didn't put in this presentation that is probably relevant is that there are governing body procedural rules that this group arguably should follow. They're in a resolution and they have public hearing procedures, and it does sort of lay it out. The way we sort of structured Zia Station is the way the governing body typically does hearings. And it does have that sort of separate question and answer period, then a motion, and then debate. And it really does separate your sort of fact gathering time, which is not limited in my view, unless you all put a limit or create a standing rule or move to do something about that. But it's more to the debate. Now I want to talk about why I care and how I feel and my opinions on this. That's sort of more the following the motion during the debate period, that Robert's rules contemplates those limits.
Clear. Thank you.
Any other commissioners? Okay, once again, Sally, thank you so much for the awesome job. And if anybody has questions, don't hesitate to reach out, not to me, but to Sally. She's the professional on this. Any other staff communications? Anything else from staff before we move on to matters from the commission?
Chair, I just wanted to mention we will be having that April 15th meeting. The agenda right now that's published has a consent item for a time extension, as well as the item that was postponed to that meeting tonight. In addition to that, I think the chair had asked if staff can reach out to some folks from our water company to present, kind of like what we heard from affordable housing. So we did, and we will have a presenter there to speak about water usage in the city. What does that kind of mean? How does that tie into things? And I anticipate that will be a good presentation with probably a bunch of great questions and answers for everyone. So if you have any questions ahead of time regarding water, please email me them so I can get them to the water company so that they can have prepared answers for you. And that's all I have. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. Any other staff communications? No? Okay. Moving on, matters from the commission. And I will start, and where we'll start is with the ad hoc committee. Last meeting, I asked for interested members from this commission to send an email if they wanted to be a part of this ad hoc committee. We limited it to 4 commission members. I got 4 email responses, so that made life easy. I'd like to appoint to this ad hoc committee Secretary Clow, Commissioner Satenia, Commissioner Lawrence, and Commissioner Faulkner. I would also like to appoint Commissioner Faulkner as chair of this committee. And with that being done, I'll turn it over to Commissioner Faulkner if you want to say a few words.
Yes, I'm really excited and happy about this committee, and I have a tiny bit of free time to be the chair for a bit, and so I'm looking forward to doing that. And I would just like to say, going into this, I've worked on policy before at the state level, and I can tell you that it's something we have to consider deliberately and with a lot of reflection and caution. And as chair, I have no intention of doing anything outside of what we decide as a team, including staff. And I think how I'd like to start, and I think I've touched base with some of the members that I thought might be appointed, but I'd like to start with a meeting where we can set up our purpose. Some people call it a mission statement, but set up our purpose, and then kind of some of where we feel is reasonable jurisdiction on code and whatnot, and then a work plan, including a schedule of meetings. And then when we got that established, when I call this meeting, if everybody's on board with that idea, I'd like to put that all together and then come back to the commission to kind of give you the broad scope of what we're going to be digging into. And then what we would do is just proceed with trying to hit our objectives. From what I can tell, it seems like most of the members all the members I talked to would like to set some priorities and then some objectives or goals, however we choose to, whatever terminology we choose to use for that. But then what we would do is we would take them one at a time, or whenever it's timely to take them, and bring them back to the commission for feedback from the commission. And the other thing that's important is one of the things we need to identify is when and where does the community get plugged in. And so these are kind of some of the bigger issues. We know we want community to be a part of this, but I think initially it's good for the committee to meet to kind of set up our boundaries and kind of get our feet wet about what this committee is about. and what it would like to accomplish. And so that's kind of my broad strokes as chair, how I'd like to approach it. As chair, I also consider myself more of a facilitator and a timekeeper than any kind of authoritative chair. And so that's kind of my thoughts. So any feedback from the commission or staff would be appreciated.
Thank you, Commissioner Faulkner. Any of the other three commissioners want to say anything that have been appointed? Seeing none. Yeah, what I would like to see is the summary of what you guys have decided for us. You know, if you meet prior to the meetings we have, and then kind of say, okay, here's where we're at, and that way the whole commission gets a idea of what you were working on. And appreciate it. Wish you guys all the best of luck in this commission. We hope we can make the wheels turn, and thank you so much for showing interest in this. It seemed like the fastest way. I know there's been a lot of talk about land use, long-range planning, different things that you as a commission can tackle in a subcommittee environment. So thank you so much. Any other commissioners?
I'm not a commissioner, but I just want to make if I may, Chair, just a quick suggestion that it might be good to just drop a bullet point on our agenda template. This is kind of for Mr. Burke, that just says matters from growth management subcommittee or whatever we're calling this group, so that there's sort of a reminder and an ongoing sort of agenda item. And then if you don't have something to report every meeting, that's fine, but just to sort of have that on there when we come back to talk about it.
Thank you. Any other commissioners? Okay, seeing none, you all stay safe, stay healthy. For those of you that celebrate Easter, have a great Easter and a good weekend. And thank you so much. We're adjourned.